Welcome to the More Great Seats for Kids podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lazinski, Director of Strategy and Communications at the SUNY Charter Schools Institute. We have a really special episode today. For the past several years, Dermoth Mattison, founder and executive director of South Shore Charter School in Long Island, now in its second year, has served as a mentor to Mark Crusante, founder and executive director of newly approved Diamond Charter School. Together, the two have forged a strong bond, and by sharing their experiences and insights with one another, have put both their schools, they hope, on the path to long-term success. They join us today to talk about that journey. Enjoy the show. Dermoth, Mark, good morning. We're really happy to have you here today. I know how busy you both are, so really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with us. So let's get to it. Let's set some context for listeners. Let's start with Dermoth. Could you share a little bit about your journey as a school leader and how South Shore Charter School came to be? What type of education are you providing to your students?
Sure. So I started my career in New York City over 15 years ago in the charter sector. And I worked in a few under-resourced community schools in Harlem and Brooklyn. And through those experiences, I really saw firsthand how data-driven instruction, high quality education, high expectations can have a real impact on closing the achievement gap. One of the moments that really stuck with me from that time was I remember there was a fourth grade student that I had who had an IEP, and he came in entering on a kindergarten level. And through some real intensive interventions, he made 2 years worth of growth in 1 year. And that did it for me. I think that really solidified for me that every child really can succeed if they just have the right support. So, my journey took me through, classroom teaching roles. I was also a dean of curriculum instruction. I served as an assistant principal. And through those leadership experiences, I really learned how to coach teachers, how to build a high performing team. And then I eventually became a principal of a charter school in Hempstead. And there, my team really made some unprecedented gains. I mean, we were outperforming our home school district by 45 percentage points or more each year in ELA and math. And eventually, I helped the organization to scale up to serve K-12 and also to replicate to serve similar communities. And during this season of my career, I relocated further east on Long Island. And I soon realized that my own county where I reside also had a need for better schools. Being a father of three children, I knew firsthand how important it was to have high quality schools. And so, through conversations with local community leaders, pastors, and parents, I really began to understand the concerns that they were having about their homeschool district. And I'll never forget one of the things that one of the parents said to me is, I don't know where to send my kid for a quality education. The schools are not safe and expectations are so low. And that was a turning point for me. So I decided to write a charter. I pulled together a dynamic group of educators, of community leaders who really also wanted to see a change in the charter sector and to have another choice in my area. So South Shore Charter School came about, and our school really focuses on academic excellence, character development, and inquiry-based learning. And so today, we're not just a school, but we're a place where scholars are growing, they're learning to be innovative, and they're developing their leadership skills.
I love that. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about Diamond Charter School? What inspired you to take on this work, and what's your vision for the school?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Mike. And, good to be with you. And Dermoth, good to be with you again. I think, for Diamond, one of the things that I have been sort of working on is, or sort of coming down the pipeline is, I've been doing this for a good while, right? I've been doing this for like 15 years in the charter school sector. I started out as an intern at the New York City Charter School Center, and then sort of worked along the ranks of working with another sort of charter school network here in Astoria. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is really see how I could um, bring my learnings to the forefront in education. And what I mean by that is I grew up in an urban school district outside of Maryland in Prince George's County. And one of the things that I have sort of experienced is the disparity in terms of education. And so for me, it's always been sort of my mission to do the good work that many charter school operators want to do. And so, the reason why I chose the name Diamond is because, you have the four C's that diamonds. I mean, my wife always says, who doesn't want a diamond? You've got cut, clarity, carrot, color. Our four C's will be character, collaboration, courage, and clarity, right? So every child is a diamond in the rough. And so, my vision for the school is really to make sure that our students really get the top notch education that they can receive in the community of Hempstead. And, being how Dermoth has come from that community, he's been able to offer insight about that. We could go over sort of numbers and all of that. But I mean, to keep it short, there is a high need there. And I mean, there is a charter school culture that is there. But quite honestly, you know, each school is different in how they approach their model. And I think our model is going to be a lot different than the traditional models that many school districts have. So, I like to say that I'm blessed and I'm lucky, and that somebody like Dermoth, who has come into my life, is sort of like the stars aligning, if that makes sense.
Obviously, the topic for today's episode is mentorship, and for good mentorship to happen, you need the experiences and the knowledge and the skills and wisdom to impart on someone else. So, Dermot, can you talk a little bit about your journey starting South Shore? What was that experience like?
Sure. So, I have to say that starting a charter school from scratch has been one of the most amazing and rewarding experiences of my life. I mean, I feel so purpose driven. I feel energized waking up every day. It has been an unbelievably amazing journey for me. But of course, with every journey, there are ups and downs, right? So there's the highs of being approved, my goodness, by the SUNY Charter School Institute. That's the pinnacle of success in my eyes, to be able to design a school that really, challenges the conventional wisdom around what students can achieve. And there was also the amazing piece around bringing people together around a common vision, right? But we faced some major challenges. I mean, we had our facilities delay. We were just months away from opening when we had some crushing news that set us back. Our deal fell apart. We had to delay our opening. And throughout the process, there's also opposition from stakeholders who didn't fully understand our mission, right? One of the hardest moments, as I said before, was when we were in limbo with our facilities. And I had to look a parent in the eye and say, trust me, we're going to figure this out. And their faith in us really kept me going at the lowest moments when things were not going the way that I would have wanted it to go. So, some of the biggest lessons that I learned is that starting a school is not just about academics. It's about really building a community where all stakeholders can thrive. And, we had to really ensure that we got the right people in the right seats on the bus, whether it was staff, the board, community partners. We held forums, we knocked on doors. I mean, myself and our founding leaders, we literally walked miles upon miles in our community just to engage with families, to hand out flyers, and to really also listen to what our families had to say, and for them to have a voice in how the school was going to be developed. And, there were a lot of logistics to navigate. And I would say that looking back now today, when I walk the halls of my school and I see scholars thriving, it was all worth it, right? It's just like all of the struggles, everything was just worth it because now you have kids in the building, they're growing, they're making great gains, and you're literally empowering the next generation.
And if I could just add to that, when I was at the New York City Charter School Center, one of my roles was to sort of enter a lot of charter schools and go in and see sort of a school in action. And, I've been lucky enough to visit Dermoth School. And let me just tell you, I mean, you go into that place, and the first thing you see is just the commitment from teachers, from every stakeholder you could ever imagine. I mean, teachers are engaged, and you have the students who enjoy being there and really enjoy the learning process. And so kudos to Dermoth. And it's not as easy as people think it is, right? To say, I'm going to open a school and I'm going to make sure that it's all fluff. Like, it's not all fluff, right? And so, I have been sort of very, very lucky to have Dermoth as a contact and for him to sort of show me sort of um the the good, the bad, and the ugly, if that makes sense. And I'm telling you right now, you walk into his building and you just feel a sense of community, like he said. And so, I mean, that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to in opening my school. But I just wanted to piggyback and say that because time and time again you see some schools offer just this rigid sort of expectation, and you see some teachers disengaged. And I'm telling you right now, it is not like that at South Shore. And I think that's something that Dermot can be very proud of, to know that, the stars are aligned for him, and that, he is really being that shooting star up there.
That's great. So let's dive into that a little bit more. Mark, was there any specific experiences that Dermot had that really helped have guided you some of the early challenges you have around starting
Oh,
up your school?
absolutely. I mean, it was funny, um, Catherine Connell Espinosa, the Institute director, was able to link both of us together. And sort of one of the things that I really didn't think I was going to get the backlash or the comments about being a charter. I mean, Dermot went through them. I mean, literally have to go through fire and brimstone of just a lot of people opposing um, your charter because you want to do the good work. And I mean, and the one thing, what happened that was supposed to only be like a 15-minute Zoom turned out to be like an hour Zoom call. And sort of it really was this notion that we still kill them with kindness. We still are going to be cooperative. And, they're not, this isn't a charter versus public school debate. This is all children. And that we want to make sure that we are providing a service for all the children in the community. And I mean, like, again, without Dermoth's sort of input and sort of this is what you're going to go through, I probably would have been sort of blindsided. And I mean, even when making the relationships, I went ahead and had to sort of engage with elected officials and even trying to make sure that people understood that, I'm not trying to get this approved right away and open my doors. I'm really going to make this a thoughtful process. I'm going to engage with community leaders, speak to them, hear them. And I think, what Dermot has gone through is sort of the standard of what to expect when putting a charter application. And it's not going to be all warm and fuzzies like people say it is. There's going to be a lot of sort of, um, you know, boiling water or heat to the fire, whatever you want to call it. And you have to be prepared. And I think the response is not to sort of make this a we versus them, but us. This is all of us. This is how we work together. Um, and there are silent majorities out there. There are people who sort of are there who can't be vocal, but that's okay. They don't need to be vocal. They just need to know that like you are in it to service the students of that particular community.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper into, obviously, Mark, you're in year zero. You're in with the pre-opening process. Dermot, you obviously went through this a few years back, and you talked a little bit about some of the big picture lessons that you had taken away from that, especially some challenges around facilities. But there's a lot, obviously, that goes into that. The hiring talent, the board development. Obviously, the continued community engagement, which Mark is going through now and went through. Like, there's so many things that need to be considered during year zero. So how did those learnings impact and maybe any changes that you had to make in year one of your school's operations? Were there any certain surprises that you ran into both in year zero and then the beginning of year one that, Mark or any other school leader should be mindful of in advance to try to avoid or address proactively?
Sure. So if there's one theory I can tell anyone is to expect the unexpected, right? I think for me, my pre-opening period taught me the importance of staying organized, of being adaptable, and really being persistent, right? For us, the facilities piece was our Achilles heel. And what I took away from that experience was that you have to not only have a plan A, but a plan B and a plan C. Because for us, there was so much opposition that we had to ensure that, we kept even our plan B and C, under wraps to ensure they weren't foiled in any way. And then there's a hiring piece, right? I mean, the first huge victory is getting the charter. That's a huge win. But then you have to really build a team that's going to help to bring this vision to reality. And, some of my key principles for hiring folks is I love to hire for passion. I think passion is something you can't teach. It's either you have it or you don't. And also folks who are coachable, people who want to grow and they're hungry just to, be coached and to be given feedback. And so one of the best moves that I made was to hire my key leaders very early on in the process. And, through coaching and in the moment feedback, I'm so proud of the growth that they've made to date. And of course, selecting a board, right? I think if we didn't have the board that we had, with such a wide variety of expertise, we wouldn't have been able to overcome certain hurdles, right? So, for example, we have educators on our board, we have folks with deep finance experience on our board, we have operational leaders, folks with facilities knowledge, and I think really having a nice mix of folks who can, really bring to bear their experience and expertise is just invaluable during your planning year. And the community engagement piece is not something you do only through the application process, it's continuous, right? So we were boots on the ground, our board members, our team, we canvassed the community, we hosted events, and we also leveraged social media, which was a huge learning curve for me because I was not a social media person, but I had to get with it and understand that it's a new world and that's how people connect. So some of the biggest surprises for me was the amount of time and effort that I had to spend on compliance and the facilities piece. And I think it's important for folks to understand that you're going to be stretched, your bandwidth will be stretched a lot, and you have to be ready to really, adapt to various situations. And so my big advice from Mark is to plan aggressively. Have a plan a plan B, and a plan C, but also stay flexible because there will be changes.
Yeah, and if I could just add to what Dermoth was saying, I mean, one of the things that he had mentioned when I first got, when I was picking his brain was, facilities is going to be a big challenge. And I'm already going through that right now in terms of trying to find incubation space and temp space and permanent space for Diamond. And one of the things is you want to be very cautious in sort of you know, working with partners or developers or landlords who want to promise you things and then underdeliver. But quite honestly, also um, having sort of the community sort of know about all of this and school districts and all of that, trying to understand that like you're not going to be there forever, that it is only temporary. So it's sort of also doing the education piece because I know when Dermoth was opening South Shore and was doing the incubation space, there was a lot of pushback and sort of that, there needs to be that sort of clarity and transparency to let people know that, hey, this is not forever. And so I'm having to go through that now. And, it's because of Dermoth's sort of wisdom and guidance and help that, I do have to be flexible and I do need to have the A and B and C. So it's always good to know that like when things don't go your way, you've got to adapt. It's sort of like a football game that I like to sort of thing. If you're down like 20 points in like the Super Bowl or something, you've got to adapt and make a change and see what works to get to the goal line. And so that's what I'm doing right now.
That's great. I mean, you can obviously tell just from listening to you that, obviously Dermot's advice is really kind of helping you build, a strong school, from the outset. So that's fantastic. Um, in terms of like the actual application process, obviously, Mark, you just went through that. Dermot, you went through it a couple of years ago. I want to talk a little bit about that in terms of any advice that Dermot provided during that time, but just the application process in general. Obviously, there's a strong focus on the academics. Trying to show evidence that you have a strong vision for around the academic program and a blueprint for success. The culture, the discipline, finances, the community engagement, which we've talked about a little bit so far. Do you think the application process helps, create a strong foundation for launching a school as well?
Sure. So I would say absolutely. I had the privilege of writing my application from scratch, and it was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because I don't consider myself a natural writer. It was long, it was tedious, and there were times when I was like, this is a lot that the Institute is requiring, right? But in hindsight, I'm so happy that it forced me to really be intentional because, when I had to think through academics, school culture, staff and finance, our long-term sustainability, as I'm in the work now, I find that during my opening year, I wasn't scrambling trying to create a plan because I had already created a plan already. And so everything was clear, it was all there. And so the work I would have had to do after approval, I was able to focus on other things because the application process really helped me to think through those areas and to set me up for success and to really anticipate challenges that I would eventually face over time. So I would say yes, it's a tedious process, but in hindsight, it's so worth it to spend the time thinking through these things before you open your doors.
Yeah, and just to add to what Dermot was saying, I mean, SUNY's process for applying for a charter is one of, if not the best rigorous ways of how you open a school. And I hope I'm using that analogy right. I mean, Dermot and I have friends that, I mean, they couldn't put in a charter in the state of New York because it was so tedious and rigorous, and sort of you really have to be able to answer, points A, B, C, D. And so sort of, they go to other states and like, it's a different process. And so what I think that SUNY offers, which I think is one of the best application processes out there, is it makes you sort of think like Dermot says, and it really is your guiding document of what curriculum are you going to use? What is your school day going to be? Who is on your board? I mean, a charter is not something that is going to be, a charter application is not going to be like 20 pages, right? I don't want people to think that, oh, I could just submit my application and hope for the best. Like, no, a charter application really makes you think really transparently of, okay, what does my school day look like? Are we going to do school uniforms? What's the lunch offering going to be? What is, the academic, what type of curriculum are you going to use for English? What's your curriculum for math? All of these sort of things that people really need to think about when opening a school. I mean, I have so many friends in the education arena that are, in operations or in finance that say, oh, I want to open a school. And it's like, oh, okay, great. So like talk to me about sort of what mechanisms you're going to use in place to open your school. And they sit there and they're like, wait a minute. Like you just don't open a school like that. Like you can't just open the doors. And it's like, no, like you really have to think this through. And primarily the reason is because you want to make sure that your students and your kids get the best education possible that they could receive, right? And so, I think it's a disservice to our children if, we had a process that was very lax, very sort of easygoing, where you don't have these things that need to be identified. And kudos to the institute for having that ability to be transparent and to even offer that guidance of, what are you going to do, how are you going to do it, right? And so, you know for Dermoth, he's been able to, and again, this is why he's like Superman and Batman combined. I say it all the time, folks. This man has done it all on his own. He's been able to sort of write this application. And for me, I have been lucky because I've been in this industry with him for 15 years, but I've had partners and I've been in the school network where I can talk to people and talk to teachers and see what works, what doesn't work, and have those conversations. So I've had help along the way. But for Dermoth, I think, he's been able to sort of be that champion and really understand that, like, this is how South Shore is going to look like. Right. And so I'm taking a piece of sort of his expertise and incorporating into Diamond and making it my own. But again, without him, I really don't think that my interview would have been as smooth as it could be um, when I had the panel interview up in Albany. That makes sense. Sorry, I know I'm making Dermoth look like $1 million, but he's like $1 million. Like, let me tell you, folks. Like, I mean, I've got a face for radio. Dermoth, I'm telling you right now, he is the end all be all. He's the real deal. Real deal Holyfield is what I'll call him.
Oh, Mark.
Well, I do actually have one follow-up on that, but I want to ask one more question about the application first. And obviously, district charter collaboration is a point of emphasis on the SUNY's application for new charters. We obviously want schools to build those relationships, both during the app period, but also long term. So, can I ask how you're both going about doing that?
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, go for it, Dermoth, and then I'll piggyback off of you.
Absolutely. So first, I don't think it's a secret to anyone that there can definitely be an adversarial relationship that exists, as tradition would dictate. But I had a different approach going into this. I took the approach that building a strong district relationship was not an option, it was essential. And one of the things that I did, the strategy that I used was I made the first move. All right. So whether it was before the application got submitted or after it was approved, I reached out to the school superintendent of my district. I didn't wait for an invitation. I made the first move. And when the offer was given to me to come and meet in person, I went to their space and met with them, with my team in person, because I really wanted to collaborate and to, help us to sit together and work together to support the students in the community who all of those families want the option that they choose for their child, whether it was to send their child to a district school or a charter school. So there was some premise that I really used to help me to guide my relationships and how I went about things. And I think one of the first things was I had a mindset of being respectful of the district leaders and not coming in thinking that, well, I have all of the answers, their efforts are, not great, because the reality is that parents have a choice, and we have to honor the choice that they make to send their child to a charter school if that's what they choose. So because I entered the relationship with that mindset, I think I was able to somehow gain some, traction in terms of winning folks over. I can't say that we're best friends, but I think I'm proud to say that I have a working relationship with my school district leaders in the school district where my school resides. And I learned to really keep the lines of communication open, right? To reach out, not just when I want something, but just to keep that connection going. And also learning to compromise where needed, right? Things are not always going to go my way. I won't always get a yes to all of my requests, but I think that if we can have a mindset of learning to compromise where needed, I think it goes a long way. So, my approach and my biggest takeaways were to be proactive, to collaborate when you need to, and to also be an approachable person.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think it's very telling that Dermoth has been able to sort of work with the stakeholders in his community, and that's what I'm trying to do as well. I mean, Mine is a different approach, only because Hempstead right now is currently, facing sort of budgetary issues, and there's a lot of sort of saturation that they are sort of saying about charter schools. And so one of the things that I am doing is, really understanding that, they have a need and they have to sort of budget and work on different approaches to service their children. But one of the things that I have said on record is, like, I am here to work with them and that they can utilize me as a contact or a resource. And what I mean by that is, when, even though I'm having incubation space and looking to have permanent facilities, we plan to have a gym, and I plan to open the, and plan to open the doors, uh, plan to open the doors to the community so that they can use the facility properly, right? And so the other thing is, I'm looking to aspire to be an international baccalaureate school. So having our teachers sort of share in the professional development with the district teachers there. So, it really is trying to work outside the box. I think for me, where I've been blessed is I've been able to meet with the elected officials there, the mayor of Hempstead, Wayland Hobbs, the deputy mayors, and they understand sort of the landscape of how this can be a polarizing issue. But they also realize that it doesn't need to be a polarizing issue, if that makes sense, right? That there is the opportunity to work and collaborate together. And as long as the children are the ones that win and the children's are the ones that succeed, then it's a win for everybody. Right. And so whenever I get the media calling and asking, well, how do you feel about Hempstead saying this? Or how do you feel about, this district official saying this? I always have to say, they have their opinion and they're entitled to that. And and that they are concerned for their own constituents, and they're doing the due diligence. And what I say to that is, I'm doing the same thing, and we are going to be partners in education together. And that, if we take the money out of the argument or the debate, you'll find that many people want to collaborate and want to sort of share best practices and how to go about making sure that every child succeeds.
I love that because at the end of the day, we're all here to do one thing, and that's to help kids in these communities throughout New York State get a strong education. So that's great. So I wanted to go back to one point because Mark has made Dermoth sound obviously like $1 million, as he said. So let's turn tables. Dermoth, can you describe your experience mentoring Mark? Were there any lessons or insights you've gained from working with him that influenced your own leadership journey and your work at South Shore?
Sure. So I would say that, the experience of mentorship was definitely a great opportunity that I, was very intrigued about engaging with. When I got the connection from SUNY and they were like, hey, Mark is doing some work on Long Island and would love for you to be able to, give some support. I was happy to do so because I think that for me, when I reflected on my journey and how I had to navigate the experience, um, for the most part by myself, I didn't necessarily have help in areas where I thought I would have had help. And what I learned through the process is that being a charter school leader can be a very, lonely road. There are times when, as the founder, it's you on the walls or you on the laptop, and you really sleeping with the vision, you're waking up with the vision, and you have this burden to really birth something that's inside of you. And I think to have, individuals with experience that are selfless in a way, and they're not afraid, they're not intimidated in any way, and they don't see as a threat, and just to lend yourself for someone to be able to talk to and to bounce ideas off of. And I'd also say too, like someone who's going to be vulnerable enough to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So not just tell you the great stories and the success stories, but stories of challenges and stories that really help you to understand that, it's not going to be an easy road. So I would say, the idea of me just being accessible and me really making myself available for another leader who going through what I went through was a no-brainer for me. And I'm happy, to have connected with Mark and would continue to be happy to help anyone in the sector who's doing great work for kids. Because at the end of the day, we're all providing high quality education for kids that need it, right? Across the state. So, I'm grateful for those who, even from other states who poured into me, folks who, were able to lend themselves to me when I had questions. And I think it's important to pay it forward to anyone who really wants the guidance and the support, especially in the early stages.
And I mean, if I could just add to what Dermoth was saying, I mean, Mike, I can tell you that one of the things in my panel interview with SUNY was, you have resources out in New York City which are great, which is like the New York City Charter School Center. You have sort of affinity organizations together. And one of the things I said in my panel interview was, it wouldn't be great if we had a a coalition of Long Island charter schools together as unified as one vision, or even upstate schools having that, so that they could be able to share the best practices. And so it's one of those things where when I talk to Dermoth, we're continually thinking outside the box. And well, I mean, we had a conversation some days ago about, okay, we've got Summer Boost that's coming into New York City. Well, you know what I said to Dermoth was, we need to get them out to Long Island. We need to talk to the Bloomberg Foundation, and we need to talk to sort of these stakeholders and say, like, you really need to open that portfolio. And so, I have a meeting with a program officer on Monday, and you believe you me, I'm going to be saying like, hey, like, what are the chances of really expanding that portfolio? And if I have to get myself at the table, Catherine, Tanya, Dermot, any of these leaders to really sort of do the education piece of, it's not just New York City charter schools, we have New York State charter schools that need that help in terms of bridging the achievement gap and learning loss, then by golly, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? I'm going to serve as a steward and ambassador for both of us, or for all of us, because that's not what we do to charter schools, right? We don't sort of, you know, we're not in competition with each other. We're not trying to say or discount people's sort of charter school from charter school A to B, or that you shouldn't go here, come here. No, we don't do that to each other. We're a movement, we're a sector that we are supposed to be unified, and we can work together. And so it even goes into sort of me talking to Dermot of, maybe we should like present at the National Charter School Conference together of challenges and what we've seen in the sector, because this is 2024, 2025. It's been a lot different 20 years ago when you were putting an application in New York, right? 2005, let me tell you, I could tell you right now, I was 30 pounds lighter and I had more hair. So, and it's 2025 now, and I've got, I'm 30 pounds heavier, lost more hair, and I've got a 2-year-old. So you're never the same, right? It's never the same as you keep moving forward. And I think people need to understand that. And as the landscape changes, we also have to change. So, it's different. It's No Child Left Behind was in 2001, and now it's the Elementary Secondary School Act. So, for those that are wanting to get into this field, I think both Dermot and I have this sort of feeling that like you should get into it, but you should also make sure that you're ready to face the challenges, because it's not all light and fluffy. And believe you me, I'm a light and fluffy guy. When I get my coffee at a bodega, they ask me what do I want, and I say light and fluffy. But that's sometimes not the case, and so you've got to adapt. And this is the reason why we need more charter school leaders that are able to sort of lend their ear out and willing to pick up the phone and say, how do you do this? How do you do that? I mean, Dermoth can easily reach me. I mean, we were texting each other yesterday, just about, certain items of, what is it that we want to make sure that our kids are going to have and make sure that we want people to know about this process. So, I think I'm very blessed in that. And I think also the Institute provides that support now. I mean, and I've said this time and time again, there used to be this notion where you have to be afraid of your authorizer. When they come knocking on your door, it's like, what did I do? What didn't I do? Like, what am I missing? And now it's more like, no, hey, we're just calling to check in. What do you need? How can we help you? And I think that's a culture change, right? And so that's something that I'm priding myself when I'm opening Diamond next year is I only get one shot at like establishing a culture right from the start, right? And so that I think is what I need to do, which is, drive the expectation and beliefs, which then the expectation and beliefs drive the behavior. Then the behavior creates the habits, and then the habits create the future, is what I always say. So that's what sort of I'm coming with, and have been able to take from Dermoth's insight and the Institute as well.
Well, I appreciate both your thoughts today because you're right. There's so much great work happening within our sector. There's so much knowledge, and if we can find a way to kind of scale that out and help kind of just build up, stronger schools and help other charter school leaders, obviously that would be immensely beneficial for everyone. So if you two, obviously, I think could help us do that. So, I just want to say thank you both for your thoughts today. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you. We appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.